I want to talk to you today about a thing that I'm calling next level Christianity. I'm calling it next level Christianity because even the Apostle Paul had to learn, according to his own words, this next level of Christianity. So let's begin by looking at the passage where he talks about this. The verse we're going to look at is Philippians chapter 4 and verse 10. Paul says, I greatly rejoice in the Lord that you last renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Now, this next level Christianity that Paul's talking about here, I believe includes things like not complaining, not griping, not bemoaning the fact that things don't go our way. And Apostle Paul says that it's something that can be learned. He learned it. There's very, very important things that we have to learn once we become Christians that don't have anything to do with whether we're saved or lost necessarily, because Jesus paid the price for our salvation at the cross. And so what do I need to be concerned about? Well, it's not a matter of being concerned. It's a matter of representing God's family well and representing the name Christian well and being someone that is attractive, salt and light, so that others who know us and interact with us want to be part of this movement called Christianity that we're part of. We don't want to be people that push people away or cause others to say, that's not something I'm interested in being a part of. And so Paul says that he learned to be content whatever the circumstances. And so I've got a short video clip I want to show you from YouTube. The ad campaign was called Don't Judge Too Quickly. And one of the things that happens when people who are not satisfied with life, who are not content, who grumble and gripe and complain, one of the common denominators is that they judge too quickly. They think they know more than they know. They think they understand more than they understand. And this is just a humorous way to explain that. And so let's take a look at this.
Look at the cute dog.
Now back to what Paul says in Philippians chapter 4. He says, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Whatever the circumstances. The things that we complain about, the things that we're upset about, the things that bother us. We need to take a step back from those things. We need to learn some things from going through those situations. And I'm sad to say that I've known people who were Christians for years that never learned this. They never learned how to not be a griper. They never learned how to not be a complainer. In fact, many of them took pride in the things they could complain about because they thought it proved how much they knew and how much they understood. And yet, as the commercial showed us, we shouldn't judge too quickly. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, do not judge, or you too will be judged. Now, if you look at the period at the end of that, that's the end of that thought. He explains it a little more. He gives a little more meat to the idea. But the command from Jesus is do not judge. And yet what do we tend to do? We tend to say, well, I'm a fruit inspector, or it's my job to it's more my job to be discerning between what's good and not good. And those things are true. But they're true for inside your head, not for what's coming out of your mouth. Jesus said, do not judge, or you too will be judged. Verse 2, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Let me ask you something today. The measure that you use with your wife or with your children or with the leaders of your church, would you be happy if other people used that measure on you? Think about it a minute. See, next level Christianity is one of those things that Paul says we need to learn to live in all circumstances. Somebody says, well, if I don't complain, if I don't argue, if I don't speak up against something, then I'm letting people think that I agree with them. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. The lack of an argument doesn't prove that you agree. The lack of an argument proves that you're just smart enough to stay out of an argument. It doesn't say anything at all about what's between your ears. And so we need to be careful about this thing that Paul calls learning to be content, learning to be content. And the connection here through what Jesus is saying is, when we see what's going on around us, when we look at our politicians, when we see a doctor, when we see people who are leading our families or our churches or our communities, it's so very easy for us to lean back and to put our arms up and say, well, they don't know what they're doing. They're not doing it right. They ought to do it this way. They ought to do it that way. What are we doing? When we do those things, what are we doing? What we're doing is we're judging those other people. We're saying, I'm smarter than they are. I know what they don't know. They ought to listen to me and let me be the boss because I'm more qualified to say in these things. And Jesus calls that judging. He says, listen, you don't want to be judged that way, so don't judge other people. Some people will tell me, well, I don't care if somebody else judges me. Oh, really? Oh, really? What if you were held to the same levels of accountability with other people that you want people to be accountable to you? Now just give that a little thought. Give that a little thought. See, there's this next level Christianity that says there's a secret. Paul says, I've learned the secret. I've learned the secret of being content. I'm content, and I can be content in every situation. You can too. You can too. Paul gives the idea that you can be content in bad situations without saying you think the bad situation is a good thing. It's not the point at all. He says, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And then there's this little passage that many people have misused through life. Many Christian people quote Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, where Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now that's generally true in life, but specifically he's talking about this business of living life in the middle of trouble without being a complainer, without being a troublemaker. He says, I can do this through Christ who strengthens me. It's a difficult job to see things not going the way they should and to keep your mouth shut, to bite your lip, to bite your tongue, to say, I probably don't know all that I need to know. It looks to me like this is a bad thing. It looks to me like this should be done this way or that way or the other way. But be careful about this judgment. And so we find that the first reasons people have trouble with this being content in all things is when they have this pride and this false self-image, where they think of themselves more highly than they should, where they don't listen carefully to the words of Jesus and listen to the advice that he gives when he says, don't judge. And however you judge, you're going to be judged in the same way. Listen, we're in the middle of a problem in our country right now. And no matter which direction our government goes, someone suffers. And no matter if they're successful or if they fail, someone is angry. And if they succeed at keeping the infection rates down in this country, there will be those who say, well, see, it wasn't all that big a deal. We shouldn't have let them tell us what to do. On the other hand, if it goes out of control, there will be others who complain and say, hey, they didn't do enough. They didn't do enough quick enough. They didn't work hard enough on our behalf. And either way, someone's going to complain. Next level Christianity means that we live as visitors and as ambassadors in this world. We're pilgrims and foreigners here. This world is not our home. And so as foreigners in this world that we've lived in all of our lives, and as we feel more and more as foreigners the way the world changes around us, let's don't be complainers. Let's don't be whiners. Let's don't put on the hat of the ugly American and go overseas and scream and holler about how it's not like it is back home, and if we could run this thing, we could run it better. Paul said, I've learned to be content. You can too. Contentment doesn't mean that everything is perfect. It doesn't mean that everything is the way it should be. It doesn't mean that maybe you couldn't or could do a better job. But learn to be content. It's a higher level of Christianity. It'll make you a better person. It'll help you sleep better at night. And most importantly, it won't make God and our elder brother Jesus look bad.